Hi everyone, welcome back after the break. So in this section, Andrew and I are going to discuss the forthcoming budget meeting. So it's a meeting that people could tune into. The papers are available as well. So if you go on the council website, it's next Thursday. But it's an interesting meeting because it's not like your typical council meeting. It's literally my understanding is, and Andrew, if you correct me, it's basically a proposal is put forward by the mayor, and all the councillors have an opportunity to discuss it. And in theory, on paper, any councillor could put their own proposals forward. So and that's called a budget amendment. So it will be opened by the finance lead member for finance, Candida Rowland, who would actually propose the motion, and probably Mayor John Biggs will second it, and then every councillor gets an opportunity to discuss it and give their opportunity to change it. Yourselves, as part of the Conservative group, put a budget amendment. So do you want to just discuss what your point of disagreements are with what the administration is proposing, or the current Mayor John Biggs? So what he's proposing is there for everybody if they go on the council website. Do you want to just talk through how you go about, or anybody else who wants to challenge or put an alternative budget proposal, and just talk about what you're thinking of your approach to what's being proposed?
Yeah, so I think probably any councillor, certainly the Conservative group, of which I'm a member, even though I'm not a Conservative Party member anymore, will submit probably on Tuesday an amendment to the mayor's budget, and they'll basically sort of say is that we want to make these changes to the budget. And what's unusual about this meeting is that all the votes are recorded separately. It's called a roll call vote. So normally, on a minor matter, you stick up your hand or something. But in this particular case, is the clerk will read out the name of each councillor, and each councillor will say, yes, I agree, or no, I disagree. And that's recorded. And so that's one of the changes that have been made in previous years. It's because, this is pretty much the only time that councillors actually have real power in a council meeting, because we still have an executive mayor model of government. In effect, the mayor has all of the power. And the one exception where councillors have some power is over the budget. So if 2/3 of councillors reject the budget, then basically the mayor has to go back and sort of change it. And again, if 2/3 disagree, he has to keep going back and changing it. So in effect, the councillors have a power to vote down the mayor's budget and force the mayor to submit a new one. And what will be in the calendar, there will be a sort of a second meeting a week after Thursday's meeting, which starts at 7:00. So if it is rejected on Thursday night, it then goes back to a second meeting. That's never, from memory, I don't think that's happened in recent years. But in theory, that's what would happen. And in theory, we might go to a third or a fourth meeting if we continue to get stuck. So that's one of the things that will make Thursday night very interesting. In terms of the amendment that we're working on, and I actually wrote a draft this morning, I pretty much laid out already what our concerns are, which is the council, and I can completely see their point of view, and it's a very prudent, financially low risk option, and I can understand that, and I understand the concerns of finance officers as well. Is, let's bank this extra money, let's put it into reserves because we don't know what's going to happen. And it may well be that, that some of these business revaluations happen, in which case we're going to need that money and we need to start cutting the budgets now. And the argument we'll be making is we just don't know that yet. And we do have extra money. We still have healthy reserves. We're still a long way from Croydon. So let's basically delay some of those cutbacks until we are on surer ground that we know that we absolutely have to do that. And I'm not sure that's quite the case yet. And we're not talking about a year's delay. We're talking about maybe a 6-month delay till September. And the other points to make about the history of Tower Hamlets is generally the council has not been good at sticking to its budget. So if they say they're going to spend £350 million, they end up spending more than that, they normally miss it by 10 to 50 million pounds. And I know the finance team sort of viewpoint is that, you only have to miss that budget by 10 or 50 million pounds a year for 3 years, and that converts what is a very healthy financial situation with lots of reserves into not such a healthy situation. And if on top of that you have business rates revaluations, then you could go quite quickly. And Croydon kind of went within about 3 to 4 years from being, in a pretty good financial position to being, in effect, taken over by government to some extent. And I think that's their concern. But our budget assumption assumes that the council will, for once, actually, stick to its budget. And if they do that, and if people do start going back to the office, and if the government are more generous, and to be fair, the government have been generous over the last year in terms of this additional money they've given us, like the £13 million we didn't know about last December, then it may be that we don't have to cut back as much as the current budget is proposing.
And so just to explain to the listeners, if anybody who wants to, say, propose an amendment or challenge the budget that the mayor puts forward, they have to be signed off by the financial officers, because there's strict rules governing council budgets. We have to pass a balanced budget, so you have to have the money to spend it. If you don't have the money to spend it, then you as councillors, we get charged for the difference. I think you're prosecuted. So that's why everything has to be signed off, so to speak. But we've got the letters from the 12 councillors that came in, so like last Friday. Has there been any movement on that? I haven't seen any changes. This administration seems to be sticking to its financial plan. Have you heard anything on the grapevine? That you've been talking to the finance officers?
So I haven't. So all I've got for definite is the letter that was published last Friday with 11 specific proposals, and we've made sure the finance team were aware of that as well. And we've been talking to the finance team because, as you just said earlier, is that when we submit our budget amendment, they basically have to check that it is correct and legal and is providing a balanced budget. And if they thought we were submitting a budget amendment that wasn't, that they could reject our budget amendments. Obviously, what we're trying to do is talk to them in advance and make sure they're aware of what it is that we might submit when we submit it on Tuesday, and what the detail is. But we're also obviously incredibly curious to hear back as to what's happened with these 12 Labour councillors' proposals. And to be, my first version of a budget amendment actually looks pretty similar to what they wrote anyway, that we would have tried to reduce council tax increase to lower than 4.5%, something closer to sort of 3%. But other than that, there were going to be a lot of similarities. But I haven't heard anything official. My understanding is there may be a sort of a Labour group meeting on Monday night. I don't know. And the other difficulty that we have is obviously the Chancellor is speaking on Wednesday, and we have to submit this on Tuesday. I think I might have to double check that. So we might have to submit this before we've even heard what the Chancellor has to say.
No, it is. But I just want to explain to listeners, although we're councillors, each of our political parties have different rules, and I know the Labour Party is quite strict. So in the 80s, if anybody reads Ken Livingstone's biography, he never applied the whip, and all the Labour group meetings were out in the open and journalists could come, and he followed the principle, look, if people believe in something, they'll vote with it, and that's it. And he used to get his budgets through. And then came this gentleman, Neil Kinnock, and he brought in these really strict rules with regards to councillors. So especially on the budget, if a Labour councillor does anything contrary to what's been decided, and they get into a lot of trouble, and it's an immediate, according to the rules, it's an immediate suspension. And if people cast their memories back 2 years ago, according to the newspapers, something similar happened to me and another councillor, according to the newspapers. So that it's very strict. So in theory, councillors can make individual decisions, but in practice, as soon as we join a political party, each political party has specific rules when it comes to councillors, and there's sanctions if you break those rules. So I presume that's why the councillors have stayed stumpf about the leaked letter and haven't spoken about it. And it'd be interesting to see if that collective decision changes. I haven't seen any papers or anything like that from the administration indicating any change. So it looks like they will be sticking to their 3-year plan, which is what's called a medium-term financial strategy. But any last thoughts on this, Andrew? Before we go to a break, do you anticipate any changes or any unexpected events happening at the meeting?
So it's hard to tell, but I think one of the reason for those tweets as well is to actually, because when they wrote this last Friday, I think they were only aware of the £7.6 million of new homes bonus. And what I'm sort of saying to people is actually there is more cash available than that. There is, there's 7.5 million from the extra money from government. There's a 30 million and a 4 million. So we have more money than we thought. And the question really, I think, for the Labour group is, do they in effect want to bank all of that as insurance against things going really badly wrong in the future, which is a perfectly legitimate thing to do? Or do they want to spend some of that money, and I'm not suggesting they spend all of it, on basically sort of delaying some of these savings programs until we're absolutely sure? Obviously, as an opposition group, this is much easier for us. Peter Goals and I are the only two members of the official opposition group. Obviously, we have Councillor Rabina Khan as well on her own. So this is a lot easier for us. We just basically pick up the phone and agree with each other what we're going to do, as we were doing earlier today. But this is, important services at stake. And the other important point is there are lots of jobs at stake here, because, for example, the library savings, they're talking about cutting 35 jobs. These are, people's jobs and incomes and families at stake here. And the argument we're going to be making is, don't do this until you're absolutely sure that you need to do it. And I don't think we're there yet. We may be in 3 to 6 months' time, and maybe we have to cut more, as I said. But I don't think I'm not yet 100% convinced of the need to make all of these cuts in the way that the mayor is proposing.
Or there could be, as Tony Blair said, a third way out of it, where we could agree on something and then review it, and then according to the greater climate, with central government making clear what their views are and knowing which way the economy is going, we could make a much more informed decision. So there's two options. There's possibly a third way where everybody could come together and agree on a compromise, and then basically move forward like a wait and see approach. So we never know. The mayor is one of the most canniest political players I've come across. The ball's in his court as to what he does in this situation. We're going to go off to a break now. And after the break, Andrew and I are going to just discuss some of the savings options. One aspect is the library, which Andrew has led the campaign on and spoke about. And the other aspect is the cuts to public health, mainly in the drug services. And I'll talk through that from my experience in the criminal justice system. But join us after the break, and we'll talk through some of the options or savings or services cuts that are being proposed.